Meet the Boox Tab X C, Boox's largest and most advanced color e-ink tablet yet. With its huge 13.3-inch display, it's designed to replace your A4 or letter-sized notebook. It features a dual-tone Frontlight, scratch-resistant glass, and a stylus with ultra-low latency. It even vibrates to simulate the feel of writing on paper. Sounds strange? It kind of is. And I've tested it thoroughly, including how long the battery in the new Boox InkSpire pen actually lasts, with all the haptic feedback. I ran over 48 hours of dedicated battery testing for both the pen and the tablet. But here's what really sets the Tab X C apart. It's not just trying to show off color for no good reason, it's putting it to good use. With a large screen, Android operating system with Google Play, a big battery, and powerful PDF and note-taking features, it might just be the best e-ink tablet for working with complex documents, academic texts, and structured content. So is this the ultimate color e-ink tablet for actually getting things done, or just a high-tech sketchpad with a few party tricks? Let's find out. And if you want to see how it stacks up against the Note Air 4C and Note Max, hit subscribe to not miss those comparisons. Speaking of which, the Boox Tab X C looks a lot like the Note Max, and I'll come back to those similarities in a moment. But first, let's talk about the most important difference and really defining feature, its Frontlight color e-ink display. That's the heart of the Tab X C. It uses e-ink Kaleido 3, the most common color e-ink tag available today, but this is the first time we're seeing it on a 13.3-inch display with the Frontlight. The colors are still muted, more pastel than vibrant, but they add clarity and structure that grayscale can. And the added color isn't just cosmetic. On a screen this size, that's essentially made for large format PDFs and textbooks, it makes a real difference for anything with charts, highlights, or diagrams, areas where the Note Max struggles. And of course, color also makes it a solid option for comics. Compared to the Note Air 4C, spectrophotometer measurements show that the Tab X C delivers slightly better color vividness across the board. The difference isn't dramatic, and you probably won't notice it on camera, but in person, colors look a bit brighter and have a touch more pop. The second big upgrade over the Note Max is the Frontlight. At up to 65 nits, it's among the brightest Kaleido 3 frontlights and greatly improves visibility in mixed lighting. It's fairly uniform, though there's a slight left-to-right gradient, which I confirmed by measuring brightness across a grid. Thankfully, the large display helps mask it, so most users won't notice. Now, as good as the display is, it's worth understanding the trade-offs that come with Kaleido technology. Like most current color e-ink devices, the Tab X C uses a standard black and white panel with a passive RGB color filter on top, adding red, green, and blue subpixels to each pixel. That's why the display has two effective resolutions, 300 ppi for black and white content and 150 ppi for color. The color pixels are physically larger, so fewer of them fit in the same space. And because the color layer is passive, it doesn't generate color on its own. The e-ink layer beneath selectively darkens areas to block certain subpixels. For example, to show red, the panel blocks the blue and green subpixels, allowing only red to be reflected. Using this method, the Tab X C can display up to 4096 colors. It's a clever system that's come a long way, but it's not perfect. One drawback is that the display appears darker. Using the spectrophotometer to measure L star, which represents surface brightness, we get a value of 66 on the Note Max, compared to just 51 on the Tab X C. That's a noticeable drop. Thankfully, it's easy to compensate for by increasing the Frontlight, which quickly improves readability. Even a slight boost makes a big difference. And with the Frontlight turned up further, the Tab X C can actually end up being easier to read than the Note Max, especially in low light situations. That said, it does come at a cost. You lose a bit of the paper-like look. The other downside is the slightly grainy texture. From a normal reading distance, it's barely noticeable. But if you look from closer than roughly 30 centimeters or 12 inches, you'll start to see the RGB subpixel matrix. Step back and it fades away. Personally, I think the added color is worth the trade-offs. Reading PDFs with visuals is simply easier, and of course comics look better too. But when it comes to pure reading without any graphs and images, black and white e-ink still has the edge. And finally, there's ghosting. That's when parts of the previously displayed content are still faintly visible on the screen. It's a typical side effect of e-ink, and it's especially obvious on the black and white Boox Note Max, which is one of the main reasons I have a hard time recommending that model. Luckily, ghosting on the Tab X C is noticeably improved. I'd even say it's one of the best performing e-ink Calida 3D displays in that regard. There's still some ghosting of course, but it rarely gets in the way of actually using the tablet. Enable a deep refresh mode in the reading app and ghosting becomes barely noticeable, even with color content like comics. The only area where the Note Max has an edge is the note-taking app, where interestingly the Tab X C shows a bit more after images. And that brings us to the second key feature of Tab X C. The writing experience. Let's start with the screen surface. Like other Boox models, it uses smooth glass. There's no paper-like texture, and while that might be disappointing to some, it has pros and cons. The upside? Image clarity. Without the paper-like layer diffusing the light, the display looks a bit sharper than other 300 ppi e-ink tablets, with textured surfaces. And because it's glass, it's also more scratch resistant. There's also a noticeable improvement in feel compared to earlier Boox Tab devices. The Tab X C seems to have an oleophobic coating, making the glass smoother and less sticky. Swiping and touch navigation feel more premium as a result, though the slick surface does change the writing feel. Even compared to the already smooth Tab Ultra C Pro, the Tab X C stands out for just how slick it is. And Boox tries to counter that with a soft, almost rubbery pen tip on the new InkSpire stylus. It helps with control, but at the cost of the tactile, scratchy feel some people prefer with EMR styluses. On a textured screen like the remarkable Paper Pro, this same stylus actually feels too grippy, almost uncomfortable, but on the Tab X C's slick surface, that soft pen tip feels pretty well balanced, just not as satisfying if you use the grit of a paper-like layer. On the upside, the soft tip does reduce the tapping sound you normally get with active pens on glass. It's not gone completely, but definitely slightly quieter at least. The Tab X C uses USI instead of EMR for pen input, meaning the stylus is capacitive. Aside from the less pointy tip, the main difference in daily use is that it requires a bit more pressure to register strokes. But that's a subtle change most people would only notice in a direct side-by-side comparison. To make up for that lack of texture, Boox added a vibration motor inside the stylus to simulate tactile feedback. So, does that work? And the answer is, surprisingly, yes. But with some caveats. When writing with a light or medium pressure, the haptic feedback adds a subtle, paper-like feel that makes the experience feel more analog. But press harder and the vibration fades, revealing the slick glass surface. It's the opposite of real paper, where more pressure means more feedback. So while the system is clever, it's not dynamic. What's missing though is an eraser, which feels like a letdown for a device at this level. I wouldn't be surprised if Boox releases a Pro stylus with an eraser later on. You also don't get any replacement tips in the box. That slick screen may reduce wear a bit, but after my extended writing test, the tip already was showing signs of use, so a spare would have been nice. So bottom line is, the InkSpire stylus does a decent job compensating for the ultra smooth display. It's not quite a satisfying scratch of an EMR pen on a paper-like screen, but it has enough friction and haptic feedback to feel nice to use. You can adjust the haptic feedback across 5 levels. Personally, I find the top 2 levels a bit too artificial, not just because of the stronger vibration, but also because you can hear it actually. It's not loud, but definitely noticeable. The middle setting strikes a nice balance, and you can turn haptics off completely if you prefer the uninterrupted glass feel. A small bug I occasionally ran into was the pen not vibrating, even though it was set up to. Attaching it to the tablet and continuing to use it always fixed the issue. Performance-wise, the pen offers EMR level accuracy, with just one minor flaw. Diagonal lines show a slight wobble. It's similar to what we've seen on the remarkable Paper Pro, though here it's a bit less noticeable. It's likely due to the capacitive layer used for pen input. Not a major issue, but worth noting. Latency is where the Tab X C really shines. 9 milliseconds for the stroke to appear partially and 18 milliseconds for a full rendering. That's the fastest I've seen on e-ink yet. Writing feels quick, smooth, and just as responsive as the best EMR pens. There's also little pen-to-pixel distance comparable to the Note Air 4C. Add in pressure and tilt sensitivity, and you get a pen that feels natural and precise. Very much in line with EMR pens on other Boox devices. It's a different experience from Wacom, but not the downgrade some make it out to be. That said, you can't swap it out for one of the many available EMR pens like you're used to with other Boox tablets, which does limit flexibility a bit. Let's take a step back and look at the build quality and specs. As I mentioned earlier, the Tab X C looks very similar to the Note Max, just with a new color scheme. It uses the same premium aluminum frame, and even though it's a touch thicker at 5.3 millimeters, that's hardly noticeable in real-world use. And while the official specs list 625 grams, my Tab X C actually came closer to 636 grams. Not a huge difference, but it does highlight the fact that, like the Note Max, this isn't exactly a portable device. With almost the same footprint as a 16-inch MacBook Pro, it's just not as convenient to carry around as something like the much smaller Note Air 4C. That said, portability is subjective, and some users may be perfectly fine carrying a device this size from place to place, especially if it's replacing a laptop. The display uses Kaleido 3 technology with a glass back plane. And just to be clear, I'm not talking about the front glass, but the layer underneath the e-ink pixels. It's standard for e-ink displays, but with a 13.3-inch panel, there's always a risk of damage if the device flexes inside a full backpack, for example. Thankfully, the build quality makes up for that. The Tab X C feels very solid in hand, possibly even more rigid than the Note Max. Still, with a device this size, I'd recommend being a bit more cautious. The tablet comes with stereo speakers, pogo pins for the keyboard cover on the left side, and the USB-C port on the bottom, which I really appreciate since, unlike the Note Air series, you can charge it with the cover closed. The power button is on the top, but I'm honestly puzzled why Boox didn't include a fingerprint sensor, especially in the most premium, most expensive tablet. That definitely feels like a missed opportunity. Under the hood, it's powered by a Snapdragon 855, which can get a bit warm on the load. It's an older chip, but combined with the 6 gigs of RAM, it's more than capable for anything you'd do on an e-ink device. The Boox Tab X C runs Android 13, which is not the latest version, but it's still well supported. Google continues to provide security patches, and most apps will remain compatible for the foreseeable future. As for now, the tablet is running the March 2025 security patch, which is great to see. Hopefully Boox keeps up that level of support in the future as well. The Tab X C comes with full Google Play support, so you can install Android apps directly from the Play Store without any hassle. That said, even though it runs Android and the launcher looks familiar, this isn't your typical Android experience. Because of the e-ink screen, Boox has made several adjustments to accommodate for the display technology, and in the process, some things have become a bit more complex. So yes, there's a learning curve with any Boox device, and the Tab X C is no exception. One of those adjustments is the e-ink viewing mode system. Since e-ink typically refreshes more slowly, and most Android apps aren't designed for it, Boox includes a quick refresh option called A2 mode. It speeds up the screen responsiveness, but at the cost of visual quality. You can toggle it easily from the e-ink modes menu. Boox's note-taking app has gradually improved, and the Tab X C benefits from those updates. One small but very welcome change, already introduced with the Note Air 4C, is longer labels are now shortened instead of being cut off by the bezel. It's a subtle tweak, but it shows a bit more polish. Beyond that, the app still includes familiar features like multiple pen types, colors, layers, shapes, templates, audio recording, and the ability to link files, web pages, and other notes. A newer addition is the Outline tool, which lets you create a manual table of contents across your notebook. It's not as seamless as the system on SuperNote devices, but it does the job well, and since the outline isn't tied to the page's content, it actually offers more flexibility. And unlike on SuperNote, outlines are also preserved when exporting to PDF, which is a real benefit for longer notebooks. Some brush tabs also support pressure and tilt sensitivity, so the app works well for sketching too. Notes can be synced via an Onyx account with storage options in the US, Europe, or the Boox default server in China. Onyx says it complies with EU data protection laws, and you're asked to agree during the initial setup. Still, I'd like to see an option to fully opt out of any background tracking. For the first time testing a Boox tablet with Wireshark, I didn't see any direct connections to Chinese servers. There's still some phoning home, but when I checked, it was only to EU and US servers. Android devices in general tend to communicate with different services in the background, so this behavior isn't unique to Boox. Still, if you're concerned about privacy, a software firewall can help manage those connections. You also have the option to use the keyboard cover, the same model that comes with the Note Max. It's still a bit flimsy when closed, which was more of a concern on the Note Max, where the rougher screen surface made it possible for the keyboard to cause scratches from direct contact. Thankfully, the Tab X C has a more scratch-resistant screen, so that issue no longer seems to apply here. If you're okay with the limited viewing angle adjustment options and the slightly loose feel when closed, the keyboard case actually gets a thumbs up from me this time. It's genuinely useful and no longer puts the screen at risk. Boox also appears to have resolved the double spacing issue that some users ran into. I didn't experience it as badly on the earlier model, though I could trigger it with some effort. On the Tab X C's keyboard cover, I haven't been able to reproduce that problem at all. PDF handling is where the Boox Tab X C really stands out. The 13.3-inch screen is ideal for A4 and letter-sized documents, because you're basically viewing them at their original size. And with margin cropping, you can even zoom in a bit without losing any context. You also get advanced viewing options like the columns mode, which lets you zoom in into sections of the page and move from one segment to the next. That's especially helpful for reading multi-column scientific papers or textbooks. And as I mentioned earlier, another big advantage is color. It makes graphs, images, and diagrams far easier to read, something that's nearly impossible on the grayscale e-ink screen. You can annotate PDFs directly with the pen, or use the split screen feature to take notes on a separate notebook page. On a screen this large, split screen actually works pretty well, unlike on some smaller tablets, where it often feels cramped. In my opinion, this is hands down the best PDF experience you can get on any e-ink device right now. Of course, you can also use the Tab X C to read regular ebooks. The built-in library includes helpful filtering and sorting options, and the reading app covers all the basics: customizable text styling, note-taking, and a built-in dictionary for quick lookups. By default, the dictionary pulls from an online source, but you can switch to offline dictionaries, though you'll need to sideload those manually, which can be a bit of a hassle. Boox also has updated the text styling settings to feel more familiar for Kindle users, so you can adjust font spacing and layout, and save your preferences as custom themes, which makes switching between reading styles quick and easy. There's also surprisingly decent text-to-speech function using Android's built-in voice synthesis. It's obviously not as natural as a real audiobook, but it's useful if you want to listen while doing something else, or if you're learning how to read, for example. You can even install additional voices, languages, and dialects. Let's hear how that sounds.
Miss Bingley saw, or suspected, enough to be jealous, and her great anxiety for the recovery of her dear friend Jane received some assistance from her desire of getting rid of Elizabeth. She often tried to provoke Darcy into disliking her guest, by talking of their supposed marriage, and planning his happiness in such an alliance.
Let's take a closer look at battery life. The Tab X C comes with a 5500 mAh battery, pretty big for an e-ink tablet. And since the pen needs charging too, we'll cover both. Before we get into the actual performance, there's an issue worth pointing out. The battery indicator actually doesn't seem to be properly calibrated. Both of my units, one purchased and one provided by Boox, showed the same inconsistent behavior. The battery drained slowly at higher percentages, then dropped much more quickly as it got closer to zero. Once it hit 10%, the remaining charge disappeared just in a few minutes. Recalibrating by fully draining the battery and then charging it to 100% while still powered off helped make things a bit more consistent. But even after that, the last 10% still runs down too fast. Hopefully Boox will address this with a future update. And if they do, I'll post an update in the comments below. Now, before diving into the tablet's battery life, let's talk about the pens. It's active, it has haptic feedback, and that means it uses more energy than your typical active pen. So to get a reliable measurement and save myself from writing like a maniac, I did what any sane person would do. I bought a handwriting robot for endless writing sessions and to keep things consistent and comparable, also for future testing. I tested battery life of the stylus with 100%, 50%, and turned off haptic feedback. which resulted in runtimes of 8 hours, 11 hours, and 14 hours respectively. Charging a pen is easy. It attaches magnetically to the side of the Tab X C and automatically charges. It's simple, fast, and while theoretically possible to drain the pen faster than the tablet, I actually never had to think about it in day-to-day use. As for the tablet's battery life when writing, I again tested it with 3 different settings. 65 nits, max brightness, 40 nits as the best compromise between readability and reduced light exposure, and the Frontlight turn-off. That resulted in runtimes of 6 hours, 8.5 hours, and 10.5 hours respectively. Reading an ebook with those same Frontlight settings resulted in runtimes of 11 hours, 15 hours, and 33 hours respectively when turning a page every 15 seconds and refreshing the screen automatically every 5 page turns. And if you really want to drain a battery fast, you just watch videos. Not the main use case here, of course, but it's a great way to see how demanding continuous screen refreshes on e-ink can be. I got around 5.5 hours of playback with the Frontlight off and just 3.5 hours with the Frontlight set to maximum. So all in all, coming from the Boox Note Max, battery life on the Tab X C is pretty much what I expected. The larger battery helps, and with the Frontlight off, it even lasts longer than on its black and white sibling. But since the Kaleido 3 display looks best with the Frontlight on, that's something to keep in mind, because it does drain the battery faster. So where does it leave us? The Boox Tab X C definitely managed to impress. It's well built, the Frontlight is bright, colors are genuinely useful, and even with the switch to an active stylus, the writing experience turned out better than expected. That switch was unexpected, and yes, it does come with trade-offs. You lose EMR compatibility, and it's still unclear how the vibration motor will hold up over time. But in daily use, the overall feel is surprisingly solid. Where the Tab X C truly stands out is the display. Compared to Note Max, the addition of color and reduced ghosting makes a real difference, especially when working with academic papers, textbooks, or anything with charts, diagrams, or images. It's not just about colorful annotations, it's about being able to read complex visual content more easily and intuitively. And with all that, it's the most capable large format e-ink tablet I've tested so far. Not because it nails every detail, but because it strikes the best overall balance between display quality, software, flexibility, and pen performance. However, at $820 or euros, it's firmly in the premium range. But even with that price point, if your workflow involves full-size documents with graphs, illustrations, and color-coded highlights, the Tab X C makes a very strong case for itself, because there's really no e-ink alternative available right now. And even the keyboard cover, which I couldn't recommend on the Note Max due to the potential scratching issue, feels more practical here. I'd say the only real drawback is battery life. Not terrible, but just not quite on par with the rest of the device. And the only actual issue I encountered was the battery calibration bug I mentioned. Hopefully Boox will address that in a future update. Bottom line, the Tab X C delivers where it counts. And right now, nothing else in this category does it better. That's it for this review. Like and subscribe if it helped, and stay tuned for comparisons to the Note Max and Note Air 4C coming up soon. Thanks for your time watching, and I'll see you in the next one.